3 nurses disappeared at the same time, in different parts of the city, at the same minute. 80 years earlier, Field Hospital No. 247 was located in a former school, 30 kilometers from the front line. July 1943 was particularly hot. The wounded were arriving continuously, the morphine was running out, and there were still 3 days to go before the next delivery of medicines. Maria Sokolova was mopping the floors in the operating room when she heard a scream. It was not the moans of the wounded, to which everyone had become accustomed, but a scream. A woman's scream, desperate, cut short, mid-word. Before we begin the story, please write which city you are from. We are very interested in where you are watching our video from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. Later they will say that it was Vera Gromova who screamed, Maria recalled 80 years later. But I know for sure that Vera was in another building at that moment. I saw her there a minute before the scream. The Gromova sisters were legends at the hospital. 3 sisters, Vera, Nadezhda, and Lubov, 22, 20, and 19 years old. They came as volunteers from Voronezh at the very beginning of the war. Vera, the eldest, was in charge of the operating room. Nadezhda was responsible for medicines. Lubov, the youngest, was on duty in the ward for the seriously wounded. Major Voronov summoned Vera to his office on July 13th at 7 in the evening. Maria happened to be in the corridor and heard him shouting, "40 ampules of morphine in a week? Are you working for the black market or selling to the Germans?" Vera replied calmly, but Maria couldn't make out the words. Then the door swung open and Vera came out. Her face was white, her lips pressed together. She saw Maria and suddenly smiled. It was a strange smile, as if she had decided something. "Masha, tell my sisters that I'll be waiting for them at the well after dinner. Tell them it's important." Maria nodded. Vera left and Major Voronov came out of the office. Pyotr Semyonovich Voronov, 45 years old, a career military doctor. Before the war, he was in charge of the surgical department in Moscow. His wife and daughter died in a bombing raid in 1941. Since then, he had lived only for his work and demanded complete dedication from his subordinates. "Sokolov, what are you standing there for? Get to work," he said, and headed for the exit. He stopped. He turned around. "And tell Senior Nurse Krylova to come see me after lights out." Antonina Pavlovna Krylova was the senior nurse at the hospital, 28 years old, unmarried, from Leningrad. She had been evacuated at the beginning of the blockade and lost her entire family. She treated the Gromov sisters like her own daughters, especially Vera. But that was only the beginning of the strange events of that evening. At 8 o'clock, Lieutenant Belov from Smersh arrived at the hospital. Nikolai Andreevich Belov, 30 years old, always polite, always calm. He checked the personnel's documents once a month. It was a routine procedure. But this time he came unannounced. "Is the major busy?" he asked Maria. "In his office," she replied. Belov nodded and went to the major. But he didn't make it to the office. He stopped at the window and stared out into the courtyard for a long time. Maria saw him watching Nadezhda Gromova, who was carrying bandages from the storeroom. Nadezhda was beautiful. Not just beautiful, but the kind of beauty that makes men forget about the war. Blonde hair, gray eyes, a slender figure. Even in her rough military uniform, she looked like she had stepped out of a pre-war postcard. Many officers tried to court her, but Nadezhda rejected them all. She said she had promised her mother she would return home unmarried. Belov stood by the window for 5 minutes, then turned and left the building. He never went to see the major. Strange. At 8:30, Maria was carrying dinner to the ward for the seriously wounded. In the corridor, she met Lubov Gromova. The youngest of the sisters was completely different from her older sisters. She was small, thin, with huge brown eyes, quiet and shy. But she had golden hands. The most seriously wounded asked for her to dress their wounds. "Lyuba, Vera asked me to tell you that she and Nadia are waiting for you at the well after dinner." Lyuba nodded, but something strange flashed in her eyes. Fear or knowledge? "Masha, do you believe in premonitions?" she suddenly asked. "I don't know. Why?" "I dreamed about my mother all night. She was alive. She told us to come home, all three of us, urgently." Maria didn't know what to say. Lyuba sighed and walked on. She turned around at the door of the ward. "If anything happens, tell them. Tell them that we are not traitors. We love our homeland." Those were the last words Maria heard from Lyubov Gromova. Dinner went on as usual. The dining room was full. The wounded who could walk, nurses, orderlies. Major Voronov sat at a separate table, as always. He was studying some papers. Lieutenant Belov suddenly appeared next to him. They were talking quietly about something. Sergeant Krylova was sitting with the Gromov sisters. Maria noticed how Antonina Pavlovna put her hand on Vera's shoulder. It was a maternal, protective gesture. Vera whispered something in her ear. Krylova nodded, then shook her head. Then she nodded again. Detectives would later question everyone who had been in the dining room. No one heard what the women were talking about. But Orderly Petrov remembered one phrase Krylova said. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Not any of you." At 9 o'clock in the evening, the Gromov sisters left the dining room. Together. Many people saw them. They walked toward the well, an old well in the hospital courtyard that no one had used for 10 years. Water was taken from a new artesian well, 100 meters from the old one. At 9:15, Krylova also left the dining room, but she went in the other direction, to the major's office. This was confirmed by 3 witnesses. At 9:30, the bombing began. German planes were heading east, but several bombs fell near the hospital. Everyone rushed to the shelter. There was commotion, screams, and moans from the wounded. When the air raid siren went off at 10 p.m., it became clear that the Gromov sisters were missing. They were not in the shelter, in the wards, or at the well. Major Voronov was the first to raise the alarm. He personally organized the search. They checked every room in the hospital. They searched the surrounding area. The sisters were nowhere to be found. But they did find something. A blood-stained bandage lay by the old well. The blood was fresh, not yet dried. A broken lantern lay in the bushes, 20 meters from the well. It was a medical lantern with a red cross. They were issued to nurses. And in the well itself, Maria didn't see it herself, but she heard Major Voronov say to Lieutenant Belov, "There's something there, at the bottom, but it's impossible to get it out now." On the morning of July 14th, 3 sets of civilian clothes disappeared from the warehouse. This was discovered by the warehouse manager. Old dresses that were kept for those who were being discharged. The sizes matched the Gromov sisters exactly. Senior Sergeant Krylova was hysterical. She sobbed, tore at her hair, and screamed that it was her fault, that she should have protected the girls. Major Voronov tried to calm her down, but to no avail. Lieutenant Belov began an official investigation, calmly, methodically, without emotion. First, he questioned Maria. "Tell me everything you saw last night," Maria told him, about the major's scream, about Vera's strange smile, about Lyubov's words about a premonition. Belov wrote everything down. Then he asked, "What did Senior Sergeant Krylova do after dinner?" "She went to the major as he asked." "Did you see that?" "I saw her walking in that direction." "But you didn't see her go into the office?" Maria thought about it. Indeed, she hadn't seen her. Belov nodded and let her go. But an hour later, he called her back. "Sokolova, you said that Vera Gromova asked you to tell the sisters about the meeting at the well. Are you sure she said it was at the well?" "Yes, I'm sure." "Think carefully. This is important." Maria confirmed it again. Belov frowned. "Strange. Why meet at an abandoned well? It's dark and uncomfortable there." It was strange indeed. Maria hadn't thought about that before. Later, another important detail would come to light, but they would only find out about it a day later. On the night of July 13, 14, 3 women were seen in a neighboring village. They were walking along the road toward the forest. It was dark and their faces could not be seen, but one of the women was limping. Vera Grimova had an old leg injury. She did indeed limp when she was tired. A witness, a local old man, told Lieutenant Belov, "They were walking fast as if they were in a hurry or running away from someone." Belov immediately organized a search in the forest, but they found nothing. The tracks disappeared at the edge of the forest. Major Voronov put forward a theory. The Gromov sisters had deserted. They were afraid of being accused of stealing morphine, so they decided to run away. They changed into civilian clothes and left. But Krylova shouted, "That's not true. They couldn't have left. Vera would never have abandoned the wounded." Then Belov made an unexpected announcement. A note had been found in Vera Grimova's pocket in her bedside table. It was in German. The note was written in pencil on a scrap of German newspaper. Just a few words. Mitternacht, Alter Brunnen, bereit sein. Midnight. Old well. Be ready. Major Voronov turned pale when the translator read the text. "I knew it. They were in contact with the Germans. Traitors." But Senior Sergeant Krylova snatched the note and burst out laughing, hysterically, frighteningly. "You idiots! It's a recipe. Look at the back." On the back was indeed a recipe for a pie, in Russian, in Lyubov Grimova's handwriting. Flour, eggs, sugar, their mother's pre-war recipe. "There's a German prisoner in the hospital, a medic," Krylova explained. "He helps in the kitchen. Luba asked him for German words to entertain the wounded. She taught them funny phrases to cheer them up." Belov took the note for examination, but the seeds of doubt had already been sown. On July 15th, the real interrogations began. Belov worked methodically, piecing together the chronology of the evening of July 13th. 9 p.m. The Gromov sisters leave the dining room. Witnesses, 5 people, 9:05 p.m. They are seen near the old building. Witness, Orderly Petrov, 9:10 p.m. A scream, the one Maria heard. Source unknown, 9:15 p.m. Krylova goes to the major's office. Witnesses, 3, 9:20 p.m. Major Voronov is in his office. Confirmation, Orderly. 21:30, bombing begins. 22, Chas. Discovery that the nurses are missing. But there was a discrepancy in this timeline. The orderly claimed that the major was in his office at 21:20. But the orderly from the neighboring building saw the major in the courtyard at 21:25. It is physically impossible to be in 2 places at once. Belov summoned both witnesses for a confrontation. The orderly hesitated, then confessed. He had dozed off at his post. He did not see whether the major left or not. He simply said that he saw him so as not to be punished. Major Voronov was questioned for 3 hours. He admitted that he had left his office. He went to check the pharmacy warehouse. After the scandal with Vera Grimova, he wanted to personally count the morphine. "And what did you find?" Belov asked. "A shortage. 42 ampoules in a week. But I already knew that." "Did you see the Gromov sisters by the well?" "No, I took a different route, through the service yard." "Did you see Senior Krylova?" Voronov hesitated. "Yes, she was standing by the old building, alone, smoking." That was strange. Krylova didn't smoke. Everyone knew that. Belov summoned Krylova. She sat upright in front of him, her eyes dry. The hysteria had passed, leaving only fatigue. "Antonina Pavlovna, Major Voronov saw you by the old building. You were smoking?" "I don't smoke." "He claims otherwise." Krylova smiled. "I was holding a cigarette, but I wasn't smoking. It was Vera's cigarette. She left a pack in the dining room. I took it. I don't know why. I just took it." "Why didn't you go to the major as he asked?" "I did, but he went into the storeroom. I didn't wait. I decided we'd talk in the morning." "Where were you during the bombing?" in the shelter, in the far compartment, with the seriously wounded. This was confirmed by several orderlies. Krylova's alibi was ironclad. But on July 16th, new evidence appeared. 3 passes for civilians were found among Krylova's belongings. They were blank forms, but stamped with the hospital's seal. Where did you get these? Belov was calm, but Maria, who was typing the protocol, saw his shoulders tense up. Krylova was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I was preparing them for the Gromov sisters." "Why?" "So they could leave for the rear. Legally, with documents." "Why?" And then Krylova played her trump card. "Because they are Jewish, all 3 of them, on their father's side. Their mother is Russian, they took her surname. But if the Germans broke through—" Silence hung in the room. In 1943, everyone already knew what the Germans were doing to the Jews. "How do you know?" Belov asked. Vera confessed. A month ago, she showed her father's pre-war documents. Abram Rabinovich, shot in 1938 as an enemy of the people. The girls took their mother's surname to get into medical school. Voronov, who was present at the interrogation, jumped up. "That changes everything. They could have gone over to the Germans, hoping for leniency, or the Germans blackmailed them." Krylova looked at him with contempt. "You're an idiot, Major. The Germans would have shot them on the spot. The girls went to the front voluntarily to defend their homeland, the very homeland that shot their father." But the fact remained. The Gromov sisters had a serious motive for escaping, and Krylova was hiding it. On July 17th, a German prisoner of war was interrogated. Corporal Kurt Müller, 22 years old, from Stalingrad. He worked in the hospital kitchen and was being treated for tuberculosis. "Did you know the Gromov sisters?" "Yes, they were kind. They gave me extra food." "Did you give them German lessons?" "The younger sister asked me for words, just for fun, how to say cat, dog." "Did you tell them about the old well?" Miller tensed up. Yes, the older nurse asked." "Krylova?" "Yes, she asked if it was possible to hide there. I said it was stupid to hide, the first place to look." Belov showed him the German note. Miller read it and laughed. "I wrote that, but it's a joke. My younger sister asked me to write something mysterious in German, to play with the wounded, to make riddles." "When was that?" "A week ago, maybe 5 days." The version with the German trace was falling apart, but another one appeared. On July 18th, the personal files of the Gromov sisters were taken out of the archive. And a strange thing was discovered. A photograph was pasted into Vera's file. But it wasn't Vera. It was another woman, similar, but not her. Krylova looked at the photo and said, "This is her cousin. She died in Voronezh during a bombing raid. Vera used her documents when she enlisted in the army, because of her father. She was afraid of Czechs." "So who is Vera Gromova really?" Belov asked. "Vera Rabinovich. But what difference does it make? She saved hundreds of our soldiers." Belov made notes in his notebook. Then he asked, "What about the other sisters?" "They also used other people's documents, but they are real sisters. Blood sisters." Voronov listened silently, then said, "If they were living under false names, maybe they didn't just run away for no reason. Maybe they were exposed, or someone blackmailed them." Krylova jumped up. "Who? Who could blackmail them? Everyone here is one of us." "Not everyone," Belov said quietly. "We have intelligence that a German reconnaissance group is operating in the area. Perhaps they planted an agent in the hospital." This news stunned everyone, even Voronov. "An agent? Among us?" "Possibly. We are checking all personnel." On July 19th, there was a breakthrough in the case. Maria Sokolova remembered an important detail. The day before her disappearance, Lubov Gromova had asked her for a needle and thread. She said she had torn her jacket. But then Maria saw her wearing the jacket intact. "Where was she when she asked for thread?" Belov asked. At the warehouse, near the commandant's office. The commandant's office held the personal files of all the staff, including Lieutenant Belov's. Belov frowned. "Are you implying that she was rummaging through my documents?" "I'm not implying anything. I just remembered." But this detail prompted Belov to check his papers, and he discovered that his ID card had been neatly filed away. Someone had unstitched the document and sewn it back together. On July 20th, Senior Sergeant Krylova was arrested. The charges: concealing important information about the Gromov sisters, preparing their escape, and possible complicity in desertion. But before her arrest, she managed to shout to Maria, "In the well! Check the well! It's true!" The well was checked. At a depth of 8 meters, a dog tag was found. It was Lieutenant Belov's Army dog tag, but Belov himself was there, directing the search. How did his dog tag end up in the well? "It's a spare," Belov explained. "I lost it a week ago. Someone planted it to cast suspicion on me." Logical, but Maria noticed that Belov himself volunteered to go down into the well, and he was the one who found the dog tag. By the evening of July 20th, there were 3 versions. First, the Gromov sisters ran away themselves, fearing exposure. Krylova helped them. Second, someone who knew their secret killed them. Perhaps they blackmailed them and killed them when they tried to resist. Third, they are alive, but they were kidnapped. German intelligence or someone else. Major Voronov leaned toward the first version. Belov investigated the second. And Maria? Maria began to suspect that the truth was completely different because she remembered another detail, a small, insignificant one. On the night of their disappearance, before the bombing, she saw a man at the well, not the Gromov sisters. Another man, in a medical gown, but everyone in the hospital wore medical gowns. That didn't prove anything, or did it prove something after all? On July 21st, Senior Nurse Krylova was taken to division headquarters, military tribunal. Maria saw her being put into a truck. Antonina Pavlovna turned around and silently uttered one word. Maria read her lips. Belov. That same day, Major Voronov gathered the other nurses. "The case is closed. The Gromov sisters deserted with the help of Senior Nurse Krylova. Everyone return to your duties." But Maria couldn't calm down. Why did Krylova say the lieutenant's name? What did she mean? At night, Maria went to the old well. She just stood there, thinking. The moon was full, just like on the night of the disappearance. And then she saw something she hadn't noticed before. There were scratches on the well frame, fresh ones, as if someone had clung to the edges, trying to hold on. Maria crouched down, examining the scratches in the moonlight. 3 groups of scratches, 3 pairs of hands. They didn't run away. They resisted. "What are you doing here, Sokolova?" Maria jumped up. Lieutenant Belov was standing behind her. He was holding a flashlight, but it wasn't turned on. "I can't sleep, Comrade Lieutenant. I'm thinking about the girls. The case is closed. They deserted. But these scratches..." Belov came closer and looked at the log cabin. Old scratches, from buckets, when the well was in use. No, they're fresh. Look, the wood is light underneath them. Belov sat down next to her, very close. Maria smelled his cologne. Strange, few people used cologne during the war. It was a luxury. "You know, Masha," he said quietly, "sometimes it's better not to see what you see. It's safer." Maria felt a chill. Was that a threat? "I don't understand, Comrade Lieutenant." "The war will be over soon. Do you want to live to see victory? Then forget about this well, and forget about the Gromov sisters." He stood up and left. Maria remained seated, trembling with fear. Then she noticed that Belov had dropped something, a small notebook. She picked it up and opened it in the moonlight. The first page contained ordinary notes, names, dates, part numbers. But on the second page there was a drawing, a diagram of the hospital, and 3 crosses by the old well. 3 crosses. Maria hid the notebook under her gym shirt and ran to the hospital. She had to talk to Major Voronoff urgently, but the major was not in his office. The orderly said that Voronoff had left for headquarters. An urgent call. Maria decided to wait. She sat down in the corridor, and then she remembered Lubov Gramova's words. If anything happens, say that we are not traitors. Why did Luba say that? What did she sense? Dawn broke. The major did not return, but Lieutenant Belov did. He saw Maria in the corridor and smiled. Still awake, Sokolova? Go get some rest. That's an order. Maria went to her little room, but she couldn't sleep. She took out Belov's notebook and began to leaf through it. And on the last page, she saw something that made her heart stop. A number, a 7-digit number. She had seen such numbers in documents. They were the numbers of the personal files of NKVD employees. But next to the number was a note in German. Maria didn't know German, but she understood one word. Abwehr, German military intelligence. Belov was a German agent. Maria rushed out of the room and ran to find someone from the command. But there was a strange silence in the hospital. The nurses were whispering in corners. What happened? Maria asked a nurse she knew. Major Voronoff has been arrested last night. The charge is the murder of the Gromov sisters. What? But how? They found evidence. Vera Gromova's personal belongings were in his safe, the ring she always wore, and a note. Vera wrote that the major had harassed her. He threatened her with a court-martial if she refused. It was madness. Maria knew that the major was strict, but not capable of murder. And then she understood. Belov had planted the evidence. He had eliminated everyone who could get in his way. First the Gromov sisters, who had uncovered his secret. Then Krylov. Now Voronoff. Only she remained Maria, the one who had seen too much. Maria ran to the head of the hospital, Colonel Kotov of the medical service. She burst in without reporting. Comrade Colonel, Lieutenant Belov is a German agent. I have proof. Kotov looked up from his papers. Belov was standing next to him. Here she is, Belov said calmly. Sokolova was also in cahoots with the Gromov sisters. She helped them pass information to the Germans. That's a lie, Maria cried. She has my service notebook, which she stole. It contains secret information. Maria took out the notebook. Yes, I have it, but look what's written there, the Abwehr agent's number. Kotov took the notebook and leafed through it. He frowned. There are only work notes here, Sokolova. No Abwehr numbers. Maria snatched the notebook and opened the last page. It was blank. The page had been torn out. He tore it out. While you were waiting for me, he tore out the page. Belov shook his head. Comrade Colonel, she's clearly not herself. Stress, exhaustion. I suggest sending her to the rear hospital for examination. Kotov nodded. Agreed. Sokolova, hand over your duties and prepare for departure. Maria was led out under escort, but at the door she turned around and saw Belov take a folded piece of paper out of his pocket and throw it into the burning stove. The last page of the notebook. She was locked up in solitary confinement, temporarily until she was sent to the rear. Maria sat on the cot and thought. If Belov had killed the Gromov sisters, their bodies must be somewhere nearby. Not in the well. It had been checked. Where? And then she remembered. There had been a bombing on the night of their disappearance. Several bombs had fallen near the hospital. Craters had formed. They had been filled in the next day. But who was in charge of the work? Lieutenant Belov. He volunteered to help. The bodies were in the craters, covered with earth. But how could she prove it? How could she pass on the information? Maria remembered that the German prisoner Müller was in the cell next door. He was also supposed to be sent to the camp. Kurt, she called out in German. She knew a few words. "Kurt, can you hear me?" "Yes, Fräulein Maria." "Do you know that Belov is German?" Silence. Then quietly. "I guessed. He let it slip once. He said something about Munich, like a local." "He killed the Gromov sisters. I know where the bodies are, in the bomb craters, underground." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they'll send you to a camp, and there will be interrogations. Tell our people, the NKVD. Let them check the craters, and let them check Belov. The real Belov died a week ago. They found his body in the forest. Burned. They said he was caught in shelling. But it wasn't shelling." "I'll pass it on, Fräulein. I promise." In the morning, Maria was taken to the rear, but she managed to see Belov directing new earthworks. "They are reinforcing the trenches," said the escort. "Strange. The front is far away. Why are there trenches here?" "He's covering his tracks," Maria realized, "digging up the ground so no one will find the bodies." At the rear hospital, Maria was declared healthy, but they kept her on as a nurse. They forbade her to talk about the events at hospital number 247. The war continued. The Battle of Kursk, the liberation of Ukraine, and Belarus. In September 1943, Maria overheard officers talking about how a German reconnaissance group had been eliminated in the area of Hospital 247. The operation was led by Smersh Lieutenant Belov, a hero recommended for a medal. So Miller didn't make it in time, or they didn't believe him, or Belov outsmarted everyone. In May 1945, the war ended. Maria returned home, got married, and had children. She kept quiet about what she knew. She was afraid. Belov could still be alive. He could be watching. 10 years passed. 20. 30. In 1973, Maria received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photograph, 3 skeletons in the ground, and a note. "Found during road construction, near the former hospital, identified by their medallions, the Gromov sisters, reburied with honors." Nothing else, but Maria understood. Someone remembers. Someone knows the truth. In 1991, when the KGB archives were opened, Maria went there. She searched for Belov's case. She found it. Lieutenant Nikolai Andreevich Belov died on July 7, 1943, a week before the sisters disappeared. The burned body was identified by his dog tag, but the dog tag was later found in a well. So the body was not Belov's. The case took an interesting turn. In October 1943, a man named Nicholas Becker appeared in Argentina. He was a former Abwehr officer. His reports mentioned Operation Nurse, the elimination of 3 Soviet nurses who had exposed an agent. The agent was successfully evacuated. Maria sat in the archive and cried. She was right. But it was too late. In 2023, dying in a hospice, Maria told her granddaughter everything, every detail, every word. "Why did you keep quiet, Grandma?" asked her granddaughter. "Fear. First, fear for myself. Then for you, my family. Belov, or whatever his real name was a professional. He killed 5 people, 3 sisters, the real Belov, and someone else whose body he passed off as his own. Krylov and Voronov were shot on his denunciations. 7 lives, and no one suspected a thing. But how did he find out that the sisters had exposed him?" Maria closed her eyes, remembering. Lyubov Gromova, the younger one. She found a discrepancy in his documents. She tried to cover it up carefully, but he noticed. He called the sisters over, supposedly to check their documents. He offered them a deal. They refused. Then he lured them to the well. Vera thought she was going to meet someone from Smersh who would help them with their documents. Belov introduced himself as a friend. He said he knew their secret about their father, but he would help them. And then? Killed all 3 of them? Strangled them with his bare hands, left no traces, hid the bodies in a bomb crater, then staged an escape. Ingenious and simple. He had an alibi. He was supposedly at headquarters. Fake documents, fake witnesses. And the real motive? The Gromov sisters were the best nurses on the front. They saved hundreds of Soviet soldiers' lives. That was motive enough for a German agent. Plus, they exposed him. He couldn't let them live. The granddaughter wrote down every word. What happened to the others? Krylov was shot on August 1st. Voronov was sent to a penal battalion and died a week later. A perfect cleanup. No witnesses? Except you. I was nobody, an 18-year-old nurse. Who would believe me against a SMERSH hero? Maria fell silent. Her breathing became heavy. "Do you know what's the scariest thing?" she whispered. There was a note in the KGB archives. Becker died in Argentina in 2012, at the age of 99, a rich and respected man, a security consultant. He had children and grandchildren. He lived to a ripe old age. And the Gromov sisters died at 22, 20, and 19. Krylova at 28. Voronova at 45. Where is the justice? Her granddaughter squeezed her hand. Now everyone will know the truth, Grandma. I'll publish your story. Publish it. Let them know. Vera, Nadezhda, and Lyubov Gromov. 3 sisters, 3 heroines, killed by a German agent who posed as an SMERSH officer, and for 70 years they were considered deserters. Maria closed her eyes. I can see them, all 3 of them, smiling. Vera says thank you for not forgetting, for telling the story. Maria Fyodorovna Sokolova's last words were, I'm sorry, girls, that I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I kept silent for so long. I'm sorry. She died at dawn on July 15, 2023, exactly 80 years after the death of the Gromov sisters. Her granddaughter published her story. The case was reviewed. Posthumously, Vera, Nadezhda, and Lyubov Gromov were rehabilitated and awarded the Order of the Patriotic War. Antonina Pavlovna Krylova was also rehabilitated. It turned out that she had distant relatives in Siberia. They had been ashamed of the traitor all their lives. Now they are proud of their heroine. Major Voronov was rehabilitated back in 1956, but without details. Now his name has been completely cleared. And the name of the real killer? His name was Werner Hoffmann, an Abwehr officer, a specialist in deep infiltration. He spoke Russian like a native. He killed the real Belov and took his place. In a week in the hospital, he identified the people most dangerous to the Reich, the best nurses on the front. He eliminated them, and he got away with it. The story of the Gromov sisters is a story of courage and betrayal. It is about how 3 young women who hid their nationality to protect their homeland were killed by an enemy hiding under the guise of a friend. It is about how the truth can wait 80 years, and it is about how justice, albeit belated, still comes. The Gromov sisters are buried in a memorial cemetery. The monument reads, Faith, Hope, Love, Sisters of Mercy, killed in the line of duty, eternal memory to the heroines. Every year on July 15th, people come to their grave. They bring flowers, white roses, Vera Gromova's favorite flowers. The story is over, but the memory remains forever.